What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another Week 5 preview, man. And we got a huge SWAC Thursday night matchup again, man. This one's going to be huge for the SWAC West race for this season. We got Arkansas Pine-Bluff taking on Prairie View A&M, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, live on ESPNU tonight. And listen, both of these teams could really use a win in this game, but for different reasons. And I expect this game to be extremely competitive. I expect both teams to just get absolutely put on a show. And I think this matchup in particular has such large ramifications for the SEC West, but in different ways for each team. So let's get into some storylines. Now, I'm going to be watching, and that I would imagine you should at least be watching as this game kicks off tonight at 6:30. Now, Prairie View comes into this game at 3-1. They're 2-0 in the SWAC already. They're the only team in the SWAC with multiple SWAC wins right now, and they could be 3-0 in the SWAC, and they would have three giant wins, two of them over some of their supposed best competition in the West over Grambling and UAPB if they can get the win this weekend. And for me, they would absolutely take control of that division with a win over UAPB this weekend and would set themselves up for huge matchups against Southern and Alcorn later this season. Now, Jawan Pass and this offense has been electric. The defense has been stout. This is Prairie View's chance to make a statement this weekend and say, listen, all that talk about Alcorn, all that talk about Southern, Jackson State, Alabama A&M, FAMU, doesn't matter. We're here to play 3-0 in the SWAC, and now we're sitting at 4-1 with a big win this weekend. So Prairie View has a huge chance to put themselves on the map this weekend. And I mean, or this tonight, but Arkansas Pine Bluff comes in at 1-2. Their second straight conference game on a Thursday night. It's kind of brutal, but for me, they're looking to rebound from an epic collapse last week against Alcorn, in which they had that team dead in the water, man. 26-7 lead at one point, and they lose by 1 point, 39-38. Their kicker gets hurt. They're forced to go for two. It ends up costing them the game. Everything that could have went wrong for UAPB in that second half against Alcorn did go wrong. And this game is huge for them for a completely different reason than Prairie View, and that's because a loss here pretty much eliminates them from the SWAC championship contention or the SWAC championship race, because now you have two losses to two divisional teams that are now above you in that SWAC race, and especially with Prairie View already being with a win here, 3-0 in the SWAC, they would have a long road to get back from an 0-2 start in their division. And on top of that, they would have to hope Alcorn drops 2 games. You would have to hope Prairie View drops 2 games. You would have to hope Southern drops 2 games in conference. It would pretty much put Doc Gamble's team at a complete disadvantage in the SWAC championship race. Now, moving into the game, though, I want to get to the keys for these teams. Let's start with Prairie View. And it should be obvious because there's an obvious strength of this team, and that is the passing game, in which Jawan Pass has been very, very good this season. And Arkansas Pine Bluff secondary has allowed over 320 yards passing per game this season. I think Jawan Pass is going to be the focal point of this offense, and Prairie View is going to come in and air this ball out on Thursday night. Now, for Prairie View, the passing game has carried them, and the way I know that is the one game where it lacked and or Jawan Pass caught the turnover bug with 3 big interceptions was the Incarnate Word game, and they got absolutely demolished in that game. So the passing game has to be on point moving forward. This passing game had a great game last week against Grambling, no turnovers, 2 big passing touchdowns, and they won that game fairly convincingly. But these wide receivers and pass have to go out and make plays against this UAPB secondary. Now, for pass, over 60% completion percentage, over 1,100 yards, 8 passing touchdowns, 5 picks, though. And he's averaging about 270 yards per game this season. Now, for me, coming into this game, pass has to be efficient for one. He has to be more efficient than Skyler Perry on the other side. And the other big thing is he has to avoid turnovers. You could tell in the games where he catches a turnover bug that Prairie View does not win as convincingly and or gets blown out like in the Incarnate Word game where he had 3 huge picks. He has to protect the ball. And even look at this UAPB team, they thrive off of turnovers. Ask Alcorn in that first half. The turnovers, short drives, mistakes, it really helped Arkansas Pine-Bluff build that huge 26-7 lead. So that's the number one thing passing this offense can't do is turn the ball over and be inefficient in their offensive production. Now, for the wide receiving core, there are 2 guys I really want you to pay attention to, and that's Jalen Howard for one. He has been an absolute problem this season. He's a huge deep threat for this Panthers offense, and Antonio Mullins has been the main target for pass, and he's nearly doubled the catches compared to any other wide receiver on this roster. Now, you look at Howard, the deep threat, 11 catches, 281, and he's averaging over 25 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns. This guy is a burner. He's going to stretch your defense, and he's going to make plays behind your secondary, and that's the number one thing UAPB cannot allow is Howard and pass to just absolutely burn them deep repeatedly. Now, Mullins is more of that every down guy. He's the number one target for pass, 21 catches, 256, and 2 touchdowns. He's still averaging over 12 yards a catch. This offense is going to test UAPB's secondary almost like no other team they faced thus far. Alcorn tested them in the second half, and UAPB failed. They failed in a big way. I mean, they allowed Felix Harper and CJ Bowler to absolutely abuse them in the second half. That cannot happen this weekend, but this has to be the key for Prairie View because that's the weakness for UAPB, and they have to just go after it full force this Thursday night. Now, the real success of this passing offense also can't be overlooked is the execution of the offensive line. They've only allowed 5 total sacks, which is a respectable number at this point in the season. And if they can protect past this Thursday night, this Panthers offense is going to be hard to stop because the number one thing UAPB did in the first half against Alcorn is pressure Felix Harper, get in his face, force some turnovers, and force some mistakes. If they can't get the pass, I'm afraid he's going to sit in the pocket and absolutely pick this secondary apart this weekend or this Thursday night. I keep saying weekend. These Thursday night games are throwing me off, but I'm moving to the keys for UAPB. For Pine-Bluff, it's really hard for me to choose because the obvious strategy, the football knowledge strategy, is to run the football. Because you can't have Skyler Perry get into a shootout with Jawan Pass on the other side. But on that same token, Pine-Bluff hasn't been the most consistent rushing team through the first few games of the season. So it's kind of like a catch-22, man. Do you want to go with your strength, which is put the ball in the hands of Skyler Perry, or do you want to go with the smart move and try to establish the run game? And this running game has really hurt UAPB this season because when you look at last week's game, this is something that I'm kicking myself for failing to mention on my recap because I don't like to miss stuff like this. And I don't think anyone else talked about it. But in last week's game against Alcorn, you had a team who had a 23-7 to 26-7 lead at halftime, but their quarterback still threw the ball almost 40 times in that game. And they only had 28 rushing attempts. Now, anyone who understands football knows that if you have that big of a lead, you need to chew the clock. You need to be efficient with your offensive possessions. Why are you just throwing it around the yard like you need a comeback? You should have established a run and stuck with it and been more balanced with your approach. They have failed to consistently move the chains. They've failed to control the clock, and especially when they had a lead last week, and that's evident in their 31.5% third down conversion rate, guys. They've only got 12 first downs on third down out of 38 attempts. That is not going to win you many football games. I don't care what level of competition you're playing at. When you look at their schedule, they dominated Lane College, 275 on the ground, but then UCA, they found some running room late, got over 140 yards in that one. But then last week they failed to consistently run the ball. It's like every week they get further and further away from what their identity probably should be, which is a more balanced attack because they have some talent in the backfield. Now, this weekend or this Thursday night, they have to stick with the game plan and run the football. If you give Prairie View too many opportunities by going 3 and out quickly, repeatedly, and giving them extra possessions, they're going to put up points. So UAPB has to control the pace of this game. You got to get Kier Crossley comfortable in this offense. You have to find him some space in this against this Prairie View defense. He's got to be the workhorse. He's had 170 yards rushing this year. He's averaging over 5.5 yards per carry and 5 touchdowns. He has to be that productive this Thursday night. Now, Skyler Perry is kind of that X factor because, yes, he hasn't really been efficient through the air in terms of especially completion percentage, but he has to utilize his legs tonight, especially to put pressure on these DNs and linebackers for Prairie View because he can put them into some real uncomfortable spots in the open field and make them make plays that they're not comfortable making. And that could possibly spark this running game with his athleticism, with his ability to make plays outside the pocket. Now, for the matchup to watch, for me, it has to be Arkansas Pine-Bluff's offensive line versus Prairie View's defensive line because it's strength versus strength, and it is so important for this offensive line for UAPB to win the line of scrimmage, establish a rushing attack, but also if they can't, you cannot have Skyler Perry getting teed off in the pocket. You have to make him comfortable and allow him to make plays because if you can't run the ball consistently and your quarterback's getting pressured every single snap, it is just a recipe for an absolute blowout. So UAPB cannot allow that to happen. Now, this Pine Bluff offensive line, in my opinion, may be one of the most overlooked O-lines in the SWAC. They've only allowed 1 sack all season. Yes, I said that right. 1 sack all season, and it was in the Central Arkansas game. That's elite pass protection at this point in the season. Only 5 quarterback hurries as well. So that shows you how efficient this offensive line is in pass blocking. And it's headlined by 2 All-Americans in the SWAC and Mark Evans II and Atondre Smith as well. They have anchored an extremely efficient offensive line, and they have to have one of their best games of the season because this is probably the most talented defensive line that they've seen all season as well. Now, for this Prairie View defensive front, they've been one of the strengths of the team. 12 sacks this season, and that includes a ridiculous 8-sack performance against Houston Baptist 2 weeks ago. 8 sacks in one game, so you know they can get loose. They can get after your quarterback if you're not executing on the offensive line. Now, this defensive lineman, this is one of my favorite players in the SWAC that I've discovered, and I think he's going to be a potential NFL draft pick that no one talks about, and that's Jason Dumas at the defensive tackle for Prairie View. 3.5 sacks this season, 6 tackles for loss, and he is living up to all the preseason hype. He is a game wrecker on that defensive line for Prairie View. He's going to be someone I am watching so closely. If he can make the impact that he has had throughout this season, Prairie View is going to have a very good shot at winning this game. And you also got to look at Rashad Powell off the edge, 2.5 sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss. He's going to be someone to watch coming off the edge against those 2 great tackles that UAPB has. But for Prairie View, the run game is even more important, and they show a unique ability to get off the ball really well. They have great penetration early. And for that, they've had 36 tackles for loss this season, and they got 2 different games in which they've put up 10 or more tackles for loss against their opponent. So this Prairie View defensive line is going to be an X factor in this matchup. And can the UAPB offensive line win the line of scrimmage, establish the running game of Crossley, and protect Skyler Perry? That's going to be the difference in this game. Now, for my official prediction, this one, I went back and forth with this one for a while, but I'm going to go with the quarterback that I trust the most to make a play to win the game, and also who can win the line of scrimmage. And so for me, I have more faith in Prairie View's defensive line to get after Perry than I do the other way around. And also, I trust Pass to make 1 or 2 more throws than Perry to win this game. And I think just them being more explosive overall gives them a better chance to win, especially in a home game like they have tonight. So I have Prairie View winning this game 28-20 over UAPB on Thursday night, ESPNU. Make sure to tune in. I promise you this is going to be one of the better games of the weekend. I am pumped for this one. But I got Prairie View 28-20 over UAPB. So this actually isn't the game of the week. I know some of the other YouTube channels are picking this one. I have my SWAC game of the week dropping tomorrow. So I'll let it wait to drop before I tell y'all, but that'll be the one I do my score prediction on. But still, comment your score prediction below. Let me know your thoughts on the game. Where was I wrong? Where was I right? What did I miss? I'd love to hear y'all's feedback. But guys, for right now, the Blue Bloods are out.